They laughed while my wife called me her marriage mistake at Thanksgiving dinner in front of her family. I didn't flinch. I vanished. Then I struck back. The Ohio cold had taught me two things: how to endure and how to build shelter from storms. Both skills served me well in my rise from poverty to becoming the architect whose sustainable public works had won national acclaim, but neither prepared me for the Keens growing up fatherless in Cincinnati's rougher edges. Watching my mother waste away from cancer during my sophomore year at college, these were honest hardships. The Keene family's cruelty was something altogether different, a calculated, manicured type of viciousness that came with monogram napkins and legacy connections. At 42, I'd built Renner architecture into something respected. My designs prioritized community spaces that would last generations. Meanwhile, my marriage of 7 years was crumbling beneath the weight of old money and older prejudices. Juliana had been different when we met, rebellious, genuine, intoxicatingly alive. The daughter who'd escaped the Keene compound to teach elementary art in Boston. The woman who'd fallen for me, a scholarship kid with calloused hands at a sustainable design conference. That version of her disappeared shortly after our honeymoon, replaced by someone whose shoulders gradually stiffened under her parents' expectations. The Keenes don't merely exist, they cultivate perceptions, she once explained, as though this justified everything. The Keene dynasty consisted of Douglas, the shadow billionaire whose Keene holdings controlled half the medical research firms and media conglomerates on the eastern seaboard. Claudette, his razor-sharp wife who'd orchestrated communication strategies for a senator before becoming the family's social gatekeeper. And Nolan, Juliana's perpetually wasted younger brother, who was forever praised as an undiscovered genius, despite having accomplished nothing beyond spending his trust fund. Tonight's Thanksgiving dinner at their Connecticut estate was theater, not family gathering. I adjusted my tie in the car's visor mirror as Juliana recited her usual warnings. Remember, Dad's closing the Singapore merger tonight, so nothing about labor ethics. Mom's hosting the governor next month, so express interest in education reform. And for God's sake, don't mention Nolan's latest stint in rehab. I nodded, having played this role for 7 years. The outsider. The architectural novelty they'd tolerate but never welcome. The Keene mansion loomed ahead, all colonial grandeur and landscaped perfection. Inside, the great hall buzzed with Connecticut's elite judges, executives, old names attached to older money. Every handshake came with genealogical assessment. Every toast concealed social combat. I was midway through a hollow conversation with a hedge fund manager when Claudette intercepted me, her smile never reaching her eyes. Miles, darling, we're short a chair for the Whitmore's daughter. Be a dear and fetch one from storage. Not a request. Never a request with Claudette. The basement storage room was climate-controlled perfection. Like everything else in this house, I was hefting a matching Chippendale when Nolan appeared in the doorway. Bourbon in hand, eyes glassy with familiar disdain. The builder of shelters. He slurred, gesturing dramatically. You know what's funny? You design houses, but you don't have a home. He laughed, a hollow sound. Your career is drawing boxes for people who will never invite you inside. I brushed past him, chair balanced on my shoulder. At least I build something, Nolan. The dining room glittered with silver and crystal when I returned. 30 guests arranged in careful social hierarchy, Juliana holding court at the center. Her glass clinked as I set down the chair. And that's the problem with modern marriage apps. She was saying, I'm literally the 1% failure rate. Her manicured finger pointed directly at me as laughter rippled through the room. I chose wrong, a mistake wrapped in a suit. The room froze in my perception. Claudette's voice cut through. Darling Chase, Ellington is single again, you know. Douglas merely smirked over his whiskey, his contempt requiring no words. More laughter erupted, practiced, expectant, as though they'd been waiting for this public execution. I stood motionless, feeling nothing but a strange clarity. This moment had been 7 years in the making. Without a word, I turned and climbed the stairs to our guest room. No outburst. No begging. No scene. I removed my wedding ring and placed it beside our wedding photo. 6 minutes to pack what mattered. Clothes I'd bought with pride now felt like burdens in my hands. The grandfather clock in the foyer showed 10:48 p.m. when I walked out. Light rain fell. No one followed. No one called my name. My phone buzzed as I slid into the taxi. An unknown number. Be careful, they won't let you leave quietly. I stared at my reflection in the rain-streaked window, a man broken but not defeated. As the taxi turned past the gated entrance, I made myself a promise I wasn't leaving to escape. I was leaving to rebuild a version they couldn't destroy, and next time I wouldn't knock politely at their door, I would tear down their walls. I arrived in Boston 3 days after what I now called the execution dinner, my existence pared down to 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. The rain followed me east, drumming against Gordon Shaw's office windows as I laid out my intentions. Gordon had been my roommate at Ohio State before Harvard Law claimed him. While I drew buildings that reached for the sky, he mastered the legal architecture that governed our lives. Now a partner specializing in identity and asset management, he listened without judgment as I explained my plan. I don't want to disappear to hide Gordon. I want to disappear to excise the rot. I pushed a folder across his desk. I need to become someone the Keens would never recognize, never look for. Gordon leaned back. Fingers steepled. What you're describing isn't running away. It's strategic demolition followed by reconstruction. Exactly. I felt the first genuine smile in months crack my face. Not a retreat, a rebuild. Over the next 6 weeks, Gordon meticulously crafted my new existence. Reed Halbrook emerged from a paper trail so convincing it would withstand any background check, a degree in architecture from Oregon State 4 years, at a mid-sized Seattle firm specializing in sustainable design. New bank accounts, driver's license, tax ID, even a credit history showing responsible management of modest debts. Remember, Gordon warned, handing me my new passport. Miles Renner isn't hiding. Miles Renner no longer exists. I chose Portland deliberately, far beyond the Keen family's East Coast sphere of influence, a thriving, sustainable architecture scene that would value my skills without questioning my pedigree, and enough rainfall to justify keeping my head down, my collar up. Greaves Architecture occupied the renovated upper floors of a former textile factory. Clean lines exposed brick, abundant natural light. The space itself was a manifesto for adaptive reuse. I felt at home immediately, even as anxiety gnawed at my edges during the interview. Alton Greaves, silver-haired and keen-eyed, studied my portfolio with the intensity of someone who built his firm from nothing. Your Watershed Commons project, the community space integration, is remarkable. Thank you. Your credentials are impeccable, Mr. Halbrook. You could work anywhere. Why choose a mid-sized firm in Portland? I met his gaze directly, because I'm rebuilding everything from the foundation up. Something in my answer resonated. He nodded slowly, then extended his hand. Welcome to Greaves. I immersed myself in work with the focused intensity of a man on borrowed time. 3 months in, I was promoted to lead architect. 6 months later, project co-director. By the end of my first year, Alton offered partnership. Greaves and Halbrook was born amid handshakes and champagne I barely tasted. My design for the Riverside Nexus, a community center built into the natural contours of the Willamette River's edge, won the Pacific Northwest Ecological Architecture Award. My new name appeared in trade publications. My new life solidified with each blueprint, each successful project. Outwardly, Reed Halbrook prospered. Inside, vigilance never waned. I maintained strict digital hygiene. No social media, no photographs if I could help it. Declined all conference speaking invitations that might involve publicity. My colleagues attributed it to artistic eccentricity rather than paranoia. Yet occasionally, I'd find myself typing Juliana Keen into search engines, watching her life unfold through curated press releases. She'd become the public face for Keen Holdings' philanthropic initiatives, appearing at galas with Chase Ellington on her arm. The man Claudette had mentioned that night was now CEO of Ellington Form, a government contracting firm with suspiciously close ties to Keen Holdings. Together they created a power couple that business magazines fawned over with nauseating regularity. I noticed their wedding announcement with detached curiosity. No mention of a previous marriage. No trace of Miles Renner in the carefully crafted Juliana Keen narrative. For 7 years, this cautious equilibrium held. Then came the Seattle exhibition. A small architecture journal convinced me to discuss sustainable urban planning at a regional conference. The exposure seemed minimal controlled. I agreed with strict parameters about photography. 3 weeks later, scrolling through industry news, my blood froze. A headline jumped from the screen, "Missing Architect Genius or Runaway." Below it, a photo of Miles Renner of me from nearly a decade earlier. The caption, "Still missing without trace." The article recounted my mysterious disappearance, following what was described as a nervous breakdown at a family gathering. It quoted former colleagues who worried about his mental state and increasing isolation prior to vanishing. But it was the final paragraph that sent ice through my veins. A quote from Chase Ellington. "Despite our professional rivalry, I hope Miles has found peace. We all wish him the very best wherever he might be." I read those words repeatedly, dissecting their true message. This wasn't sympathy. It was a warning shot across my bow. I scanned my office, suddenly aware of every colleague beyond my door. Had someone recognized me, made a connection? Was someone already on their way to Portland? Or worse, were they already here, watching, waiting to expose the lie I'd built my new life upon? After 7 years as Reed Halbrook, I'd developed a false sense of security. The carefully constructed walls between my past and present seemed impenetrable. I was wrong. An October morning painted Portland in shades of amber and rust when my assistant buzzed through, "Mr. Halbrook, there's a Miss Travers here about the Riverfront Commission. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Something in her tone raised my guard. "Give me 5 minutes, then send her in." The woman who entered moved with the careful precision of someone cataloging details. Mid-30s, immaculately tailored charcoal suit, sharp eyes that absorbed everything. She handed me a business card. "Sloan Travers, private investigator." "How can Greaves and Halbrook help you, Ms. Travers?" I maintained the practiced ease of Reed Halbrook's successful architect man, without secrets. She smiled, not unkindly, but with certainty. "My client is interested in a custom residential project, something that bridges past and present architectural elements." We danced through 20 minutes of architectural jargon while my assistant brought coffee. The moment the door closed behind him, Travers's demeanor shifted. "I'll save us both time, Mr. Renner." She slid a manila folder across my desk. Inside were photographs me at the Seattle exhibition. My face, highlighted, matched against an old driver's license photo of Miles Renner. "You're Miles Renner," she stated flatly. "Missing for 7 years, I was hired to find you." A pause, and I did. My pulse hammered, but I kept my face neutral. "What exactly do you want?" "Nothing, I'm just the messenger." Sloan leaned forward. "Your photo from Seattle was flagged by a facial recognition algorithm scanning architectural publications. Juliana Keene initially hired me, but the case was quickly transferred to a team working for Chase Ellington. I fought to keep my breathing even. And now? Now they're en route to Portland." She gathered her things. "Not to apologize." Sloan paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I usually don't warn my subjects, but there's something ugly about this case. Something beyond finding a missing person." After she left, I called Gordon. They found me, Protocol Omega. The next morning, my assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Halbrook, there are several people in reception insisting on seeing you. They don't have appointments." I straightened my tie, steadied my breathing. "Send them in." Juliana entered first, still beautiful, but with shadows beneath her perfect makeup. The years had added elegant lines around her eyes, a certain tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. Behind her came Chase Ellington. Tall Brooks Brothers suit, the practiced confidence of old money. Then Nolan Keene, looking surprisingly sober, followed by the true shock, Wyatt Crowley. My former business partner, the man I'd trusted like a brother. "Miles." Juliana's voice cracked on my name. "I'm Reed Halbrook." My voice was ice. "And you're trespassing in my office." Juliana stepped forward, tears threatening. "Please, we need to talk privately." I dismissed my assistant with a nod. When the door closed, I remained standing. "You have 5 minutes. You have a son." The words tumbled from Juliana. After you left that night, I discovered I was pregnant. I couldn't find you. My parents. She swallowed hard. Chase agreed to claim Emmett as his. It was easier. My world tilted sideways. A child. My child. Emmett is 6 now. She continued, voice hollow. He has acute myeloid leukemia. We've tried everything. The only viable match for bone marrow is you. Chase stepped forward, all business. We need what's in your veins. No apology, no acknowledgement of the orchestrated humiliation that drove me away. Just cold calculation. Wyatt stood in the corner, unable to meet my eyes. The realization struck like lightning he'd known about my son. For how long? Since the beginning. Why would you claim my child? I asked Chase directly. Douglas insisted. He replied as if that explained everything. Of course, everything in their world served Douglas Keene's grand design. I studied each face carefully. I'll agree to testing, but on my terms. My medical team, my oversight, complete transparency. Juliana nodded, relief flooding her face. Claudette wasn't present, but she'd sent a message via Nolan. Douglas says if Miles helps the Keenes, we'll consider reintegration. As if I were a defective product they might deign to repair. They left shortly after promising to set up the medical protocols. Alone in my office, doubt crept in like fog. They hadn't searched for me for 7 years. Why the sudden urgency? Why would Chase Ellington willingly claim another man's child, unless there was significant advantage? Too many pieces didn't fit. This wasn't just about saving a life. That night, I quietly upgraded my personal security systems. I contacted Gordon to establish independent verification of all medical data. I started digging into financial records linked to healthcare research. When I traced anonymous funding patterns to a company called Helix Nova Research, the pieces snapped together with terrifying clarity. Emmett wasn't just my son. He was the next-generation Keene biotech asset. Gordon moved with remarkable efficiency. Within 48 hours, he had assembled a medical team I could trust, people with no connections to Keene Holdings or its subsidiaries. The DNA results arrived 3 days later. 99% probability that I was Emmett's biological father. Dr. Sanjay Patel, Gordon's medical school friend who specialized in hematology and transplantation, personally reviewed the HLA typing. He called me directly with the results. You're a 910 HLA match with the boy. He said, his voice carrying the weight of both medical and emotional significance. That's extraordinarily high, even for a biological parent. The transplant has excellent chances of success. And the rest of it? The samples. I asked. Sanjay hesitated. Your suspicions were warranted. The additional blood work they requested goes far beyond what's needed for a bone marrow transplant. They're mapping your entire genetic profile. I signed the consent forms for the marrow donation, but added specific legal language limiting the use of my genetic material solely to Emmett's immediate treatment. Gordon filed additional paperwork establishing my legal right to oversight of all medical decisions regarding my son, paperwork that would become active the moment paternity was officially acknowledged. I couldn't wait for the formalities of a proper introduction. Using credentials. Gordon arranged I entered Hartford Memorial Hospital as Dr. Davis Hallbrook, a consulting physician. The pediatric oncology ward was painted with underwater scenes, dolphins, whales, and fish swimming across walls that had witnessed too much suffering. Emmett's room was at the end of the hall. He sat cross-legged on his bed, focused on a tablet where he was designing a virtual city. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he dragged buildings into place with precise movements. My heart contracted painfully. In his profile, I saw my own features, the set of his jaw, the furrow of concentration between his brows. Your power grid is inefficient, I said from the doorway. You should loop it around the commercial district. He looked up, eyes narrowing with assessment, my eyes evaluating a structural problem. You know about city planning. I'm an architect. Really? Sudden enthusiasm brightened his face. I want to build cities too, not just buildings, whole systems. For 40 minutes we talked about load-bearing walls and sustainable energy integration. He was astonishingly articulate for a 6-year-old, with a grasp of spatial relationships that went beyond natural talent into something approaching genius. As I was about to leave, Emmett fixed me with a direct stare. Are you the man from my mom's hidden picture? My breath caught. What picture? the one she keeps in her nightstand. She cries sometimes when she looks at it. His gaze was unflinching. You look like him, but older. I had no answer that wouldn't be a lie. Chase Ellington appeared at the hospital the next afternoon, his arrival heralded by the deferential behavior of hospital staff well aware of who funded the new oncology wing. He found me observing Emmett through the window of the playroom. You were explicitly not to have contact, he hissed, careful to maintain his public smile. Juliana made a tactical error allowing this meeting. He's my son. He carries my name. Chase's voice hardened. My reputation, my legal standing, you're nothing but a donor. I turned to face him fully. You have the paperwork. I have the bloodline. Something ugly flickered across his perfect features. The only reason you're here is because we need what's in your veins. After that, you go back to being a ghost. In that moment, I saw clearly what Emmett was to him. Not a child, but leverage. A biological asset binding him to the Keen fortune. Gordon and Sanjay's combined investigation painted a disturbing picture. Helix Nova Research was indeed a Keen Holdings subsidiary, specializing in rare genetic markers with therapeutic potential. Their research focused on developing proprietary treatment platforms, patentable medical technologies that could generate billions. Emmett, with his unique combination of genetic markers from two rare lineages, my Ashkenazi heritage and Juliana's Nordic ancestry, was the ideal research subject for their next-generation trials. Most disturbing was the emergency medical guardianship Douglas had quietly filed. If approved, it would give him control over Emmett's treatment decisions, superseding both Juliana's maternal rights and any claim I might establish. The morning before the scheduled transplant, I received a text asking me to meet in the hospital chapel. I expected Gordon or Sanjay. Instead, I found Claudette Keen lighting a candle in the empty room. You've never been religious, I observed. I'm not praying for divine intervention. I'm creating a moment of privacy. She handed me a heavy file with original seals and notary stamps. Medical power of attorney documents, genetic exclusivity contracts, the links between Helix Nova Chase and Douglas, why? I leafed through pages of damning evidence. Why are you giving me this? Claudette's perfect composure cracked slightly. I was always the silent partner, the one who enabled Douglas's ambitions, but I've already lost Nolan to his father's expectations. I won't lose Emmett, too. For the first time, I glimpsed the mother beneath the carefully constructed Keen matriarch. Back at my hotel, I called Gordon. Activate the countermeasure file. Get everything on Helix Nova transactions. Dig deeper into Chase Track. Douglas's Cayman accounts. Simultaneously, Sanjay sent encrypted files detailing the plan to use Emmett as a research platform, immediately following the transplant. If I didn't intervene, my son would become a perpetual test subject, all made legal through consent forms I would sign if I wasn't careful. That night, I stared at a photo of Emmett sleeping that Juliana had sent. I didn't sleep. I was no longer an architect building cities. I was a gravedigger for those who had once buried me alive. The transplant was successful. Emmett's body accepted my marrow with remarkable efficiency. Sanjay called it textbook perfect. As I recovered in a private room monitoring his progress from afar through medical reports, an unexpected visitor arrived. Wyatt Crowley stood in my doorway looking like he'd aged a decade. Gray streaked his once dark hair. Deep lines carved paths from his nose to his mouth. The confident partner I'd once trusted was gone, replaced by a haunted shell. You look like shit, I observed. I paid for my silence. He entered without invitation. Marriage collapsed. Drinking problem, career, reduced to being the Keen's pet architect. He dropped a USB drive on my bedside table. This is my attempt at atonement. 7 years late. Better than never. His hands trembled slightly. That drive contains internal documents from Ellington Form and Helix Nova. I thought you should know what you're really up against. I didn't touch it. Why the sudden conscience? I watched what they did to you, then watched them do it to others. He looked away, and now they're doing it to a child. After he left, I called Gordon. 4 hours later, we were reviewing the files in a secure conference room he'd arranged at a nearby hotel. The contents were explosive. Architectural plans for the Westlake development, my signature design from before I disappeared, now bearing Ellington Form's logo, financial records documenting Chase Ellington's payments to permit officials across 3 states. Most disturbing, a clinical trial roster listing pediatric subjects with rare genetic markers. Emmett's name appeared in Phase 2. This is exactly what we need, I said, reaching for my phone. Gordon caught my wrist. Wait, look at the metadata. He pulled up the file properties. According to the digital signature, these documents had been accessed using my personal devices that had disappeared when Miles Renner did It's a Trap. Gordon confirmed. The documents are legitimate, but if you distribute them, you'll be implicated in corporate espionage and intellectual property theft. They'd trace it back to you, not to Chase or Douglas. They're using real information as bait. No, which means they're confident you'll act on instinct rather than strategy. Gordon closed his laptop. They know you now have motive, Emmett, and they're giving you the means to self-destruct. I contacted Sloane Travers, whose investigative skills I now trusted more than most. Within days, she confirmed my suspicions. Wyatt had met with Douglas Keene twice and Chase Ellington 3 times before approaching me. Financial records showed nonprofit compensation transfers from Ellington Foundation to an LLC registered in Wyatt's wife's maiden name. Rather than using the poisoned evidence directly, I leveraged Sloane's documentation of the meetings themselves. Financial transfers. Security camera footage of Wyatt entering Keene buildings. These became my ammunition. Indirect but devastating proof of conspiracy. Meanwhile, Emmett grew stronger daily. His blood was now producing new cells, his color improving his energy. Returning, I visited him as Dr. Holbrook, watching him flourish. He reminded me increasingly of myself, his methodical approach to problems, his fascination with interconnected systems, his quiet intensity. When designing one afternoon as he sketched a house with elaborate garden connections, he whispered something that chilled me. Grandpa Douglas says I'm the next generation vessel. I don't know what that means. His small fingers continued drawing precise lines. But Mom was crying after she overheard him talking to the doctors. That evening, Juliana asked to meet privately in the hospital garden. Her hands twisted nervously as she revealed what she'd discovered. Chase has been moving money from our joint accounts to holdings in Luxembourg and Switzerland. Over $12 million so far. Her voice shook. And Douglas. He's prepared transfer paperwork for Emmett's medical authority. If anything happens to invalidate my custody or your parental rights, all medical decisions revert to a research board at Helix Nova. I studied her face, searching for the woman I'd once loved beneath the Keene facade. You have 2 choices: Juliana, file for divorce from Chase immediately, or watch your son become a permanent research specimen. And if I divorce him, then I'll ensure you and Emmett have legal, financial, and physical protection for the rest of your lives. Her eyes, so like our son's, held mine. Do you hate me, Miles? I stopped feeling anything for you years ago. I answered truthfully, but Emmett deserves parents who'll protect him at any cost. The next morning, Juliana signed divorce papers prepared by a Hartford attorney. I'd arranged someone with no connections to Keene Holdings. She provided Gordon with internal financial documents confirming Chase's illegal asset shifting. The alliance I never expected was forming. We officially named our counterstrike Operation Eclipse, a deliberate blackout of the Keene Empire's brightest stars. Our team consisted of myself, Gordon Shaw handling legal strategy, Sloane Travers managing investigation, Dr. Sanjay overseeing medical documentation, and Juliana providing insider access. Our objectives were clear. We would expose Helix Nova's ethical violations regarding pediatric research subjects, reveal Chase's financial fraud and architectural theft, and bring Douglas's stock manipulation and research coercion into the harsh light of public scrutiny. The following day, I brought Emmett a new Lego architecture set. His face lit up as he tore into the package. "Dad," he said, the words still new between us, "I'm building a tower that nobody can knock down." I nodded, throat tight. "You keep building, son. I'll handle the people who knocked mine down." Operation Eclipse struck with the precision of a master architect's design. Gordon Shaw filed simultaneous ethics complaints with the National Bioethics Advisory Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The documents were meticulous. Each allegation supported by evidence, each violation cross-referenced with applicable laws and precedents. Nothing tied back to me. Sloan Travers released her independent investigation through a journalist known for exposing pediatric medical scandals. The report detailed Helix Nova's pattern of targeting children with rare genetic markers, minimizing risks to parents and obscuring true research objectives behind benevolent-sounding clinical trials. I remained in the shadows, signing only as concerned citizen on whistleblower documents. My revenge would be more satisfying if they never saw the hand that struck them down. The response was swift, devastating, and beautiful in its ordered collapse, like watching a condemned building implode floor by floor. Helix Nova. Research facilities were raided by federal agents within 48 hours. Laboratories were sealed. Computers confiscated research. Frozen investors fled en masse, triggering a stock price freefall that erased 82% of the company's value in 2 days. Douglas Keene was summoned for emergency Senate testimony on research ethics violations. Before he could appear, a cascade of leaked emails and contracts flooded media channels. Most damning was his response to a research ethics concern typed in his characteristic blunt manner. "Children are the best data sources because they can't sue." Juliana stepped into the spotlight with extraordinary courage, publicly condemning her father's coercion and forgery of medical authorizations. The press dubbed her the ice-blooded insider whistleblower, a title she wore with grim determination during her interviews. Chase Ellington's downfall came next. The SEC filed charges for financial fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and bid rigging on government contracts. His assets were frozen. His client list evaporated overnight. Federal agents arrested him at JFK Airport attempting to board a flight to Dubai using a passport under a different name. Douglas Keene didn't go quietly. FBI agents arrived at his estate to serve a warrant for healthcare corruption, and insider trading security cameras captured his meltdown. "I built this entire city. I'll sue the United States of America." The footage went viral within hours, his face contorted with the rage of a man who believed himself untouchable. Class action lawsuits followed from victims of his medical schemes, including families of 4 children, subjected to experimental protocols without proper consent. Douglas Keene faced 39 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. The Keene dynasty crumbled brick by brick. Claudette Keene retreated from public view, taking Nolan to a rehabilitation facility in Montana. The media empire, the mansions, the political connections all vanished, leaving only a modest country house and a tarnished legacy. A handwritten letter arrived at my Portland office 3 months later. "I am no longer a woman defending a reputation. I am simply a grandmother. Thank you for saving Emmett." Claudette Emmett recovered fully. His body embraced my marrow as if recognizing its source, his blood now producing healthy cells. He returned to school with the resilience only children possess. Juliana and I established a co-parenting arrangement with clear boundaries and schedules. Emmett spent half his time with me in Portland, half with her in a modest Hartford home, purchased with what remained of her divorce settlement. We would never be a traditional family, but we could be functional adults raising an extraordinary child. One evening, Emmett handed me a drawing he'd been working on for weeks. 3 houses, mine, his mother's, and in the center a structure labeled Emmett's house, connected by bridges he had named the Halbrook Crossing. I cried for the first time in 8 years, not from defeat, but from triumph, not from loss, but from reclamation. When Ellington Form's assets were liquidated in bankruptcy proceedings, I became the controlling shareholder. Through a series of holding companies, I renamed it Renner Design Revival, a deliberate reclaiming of the name they had tried to erase. No one knew I was the architect behind Operation Eclipse. I preferred it that way. Let Juliana and Emmett stand in the light. My place was in the careful shadows of strategic planning. On my Portland balcony, I watched the city lights while Emmett slept peacefully inside. In my hands was his latest design, a tower of light with structural supports engineered to withstand any force. "You won't be their product," I whispered. "You'll be the builder of your own world." I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need them on their knees. I only needed them to fall. And now they had. That was justice, and I had constructed it, like I would a building upon foundations laid in the blood of the past.